Welcome to Our Power is Within, a weekly podcast to inspire you to take your power back, to realize that you're the healer that you've been looking for all along. We are capable of healing in mind, in body, and soul, and I'm your host, Chasmith. Today's episode is sponsored by Autoimmune Resolution, a 6-month program to help you break the cycle of fear and stop symptoms in their tracks with the power of GNM, or German New Medicine, sometimes referred to as GHK or Germanic Healing Knowledge. Learning about GNM and understanding our biological reason for symptoms and what they actually mean has literally been a game changer for me in my life and my relationship with symptoms and what these symptoms mean about me. To learn more about the founder of Autoimmune Resolution, check out episode 76 in the podcast with Catherine Hausch and visit www.autoimmuneresolution.com to learn more now. So, I hope that you are all finding new and creative, fun ways to show yourself love this month as we continue in the 5 love language monthly challenge rather than week-long challenge. We are using the 5 love languages, which are affirmation, gifts, touch, quality time, and acts of service to love ourselves. And I hope you are exploring and playing and having fun with this throughout the month. And make sure that you are practicing doing the challenges now, because in the new year, I have some really fun challenge ideas that will also be including prizes. So opportunities to win prizes for participation. So practice, and you will learn more about that in the new year. In the meantime, just keep loving on yourself. I wanted to take a pause and take a moment to welcome anyone who might be a new listener to the podcast. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I really do hope that you find value in tuning in today. If you have any specific questions or you are looking for any specific topics or possibly any specific symptoms that other people have healed, please feel free to reach out to me anytime and I can steer you in the right direction and let you know which episodes might have some value for you. I know there's a lot out there to sift through. Also, if there is anybody out there who is doing DNRS and is at a place where it is still outside of their window of tolerance to hear any form of symptom talk, you can also reach out to me and I would be glad to send you a list of DNRS friendly episodes. Okay. And to be really honest, a lot in the very beginning of the podcast, like probably the first big chunk of testimonials are all DNRS friendly. So you would be safe there. Okay. Now that I got that out of the way, also wanted to say for everybody who's been a long-time listener, thank you so much for your continued support. Thank you for continuing to leave positive reviews and feedback. Thank you for sharing this podcast with friends and family and your dedication. Thank you for those of you who have left monetary donations for future episodes. I just really appreciate each and every one of you and your continued dedication. Anybody out there who might have a story to share, a testimonial, something that you've learned along the way in your journey that you find so supportive that you want the world to know about? If so, let's connect. You know how to get a hold of me. And in the meantime, I want to welcome our guest today, Vanessa Azelis. You might know her as Your Grateful Guide. Vanessa is here to share beautiful testimonial of healing and hope with us today, and all the wisdom that she has learned along the way through her own personal journey. She also shares with us practical tips and tricks to elevate our healing journey no matter where we are at in it. I had so much fun talking to Vanessa, and I really hope that you enjoy our time together as much as I did. Vanessa, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we're going to do, like what I usually do, is we're going to start out with you getting an opportunity to share a little bit about your own personal healing and recovery story. And just kind of give us a brief background on what what you've been through and what are some of the steps you've taken to get to where you are today.
Sure. Okay, so my journey, my chronic illness journey started, I would say, in 2009. And it all started with these really weird, unexplainable symptoms that just, made me go back and forth to the ER. No doctor could explain them. I had vestibular issues, pressure in my chest, just a bunch of different weird symptoms. None of them lined up. Different levels in my blood work was just, it was one of those things where no one could figure out why I was feeling so unwell. And prior to that, I was a federal officer, and one of my functions was to air marshal, so deport foreign nationals back home. And so I was quite fit and healthy and strong, and it was unlike me to be always sick. So at that point, I was just catching every bug and getting hit really hard. So like pneumonia, bronchitis, all of these different things. And it basically got to a point where I was just completely incapacitated. I was unable to walk because of the vestibular issues. I was unable to work. I had so many weird symptoms and was just in such a deep and dark place. And it basically was right before my wedding. So I, had just purchased a house with my then fiance, who's now my now husband. And, I was on top of the world, and it just seems like everything came to a complete crashing halt in 2009. In addition to all of these symptoms in December, I ended up catching another nasty bug. And, I ended up, collapsing, having a pretty gnarly concussion, and getting stitches on my face right before my wedding. So it was just a time of just nonstop, no answers. The doctors just kept prescribing me antidepressants and telling me it was all anxiety. You moved to a new house, you're getting married, this is normal. And it was not normal. So I was, very much ignored by my doctors. Nobody knew what was going on. And it wasn't until I saw a neurologist who put two and two together. He's like, you just came from Vietnam, in the summer, and that's when your stuff started. And I was like, yeah, that's true. And he's like, I think you brought something back with you. And then that kind of led me into the journey of the tropical diseases unit, where they did so many tests, and tests that weren't even available in Canada. They sent to the CDC, and they found that I had a pretty deadly 70% death rate parasite. And at that point, we started basically chemotherapy to eradicate it. And it was weeks before my wedding. So my wedding came, and I was very unwell from the treatment. And it was just a really stressful and hard time. And so, fast forward to make a really long story short, after we did the treatment for it, I never recovered. I expected everything to go back to the way it was, and it just never did. And with each year that passed, I felt like I, took on a new symptom or a new diagnosis. Sometimes it was even monthly. I would go to the doctor and be like, well, you have this now. And it was very challenging, to say the least, especially when you're starting off, your own new family, basically, right? I'm moving into a house with my husband. And it just felt like I had been sick since day one. And thankfully, I was able to carry two healthy babies. The pregnancies were really difficult. And it wasn't until 17, 18, where things got even worse. And at this point, I was like, they can't get any worse. And they did. And that was, during a time in my life where I was really stressed. I had two young children. I was already dealing with so many symptoms of nervous system dysfunction and dysregulation. I was just, popping medication as needed for just the chronic pain that I had, the migraines, the upset stomach. I was diagnosed with IBS at that point, vestibular issues, migraine, anxiety. And around that time, I was working, and I decided to go back to school to take some extra courses, and we were doing a home renovation. So add all these things together, and it was just like just too much for my nervous system. And it basically ended up in me being knocked off my feet for months. I was so bad that I was hospitalized because I ended up developing, symptoms of passing out when I stood up. I wasn't able to stand or even sit up. I was unable to walk because of the vestibular stuff. I crawled everywhere. It was so bad that I couldn't eat, and the gastroparesis was so intense. I ended up being hospitalized for over a month and a half, and it was so bad that my father, who was in Greece vacationing, was called back immediately because they basically told him she's not looking good, parts of her body are failing, and you need to come back. And at this point, I was in the hospital, completely unable to move. So I was reliant on IV fluids and, you know, needed full time care at this point, away from my kids. My husband, my poor husband was, he would do his day to day job and just think of how, what would funeral arrangements look like. So I was really unwell. And in that hospital visit is when I was actually diagnosed with POTS syndrome, and as well as small fiber neuropathy. And I had no clue what that was before, and the doctors really didn't either. They found it as a result of some searches on their own databases and like Google searches. And they basically said, this is going to be your life. You're going to be confined to likely a bed or a wheelchair, and you're just going to have to make the most of it. And at that point, they put me on 12 different medications for different parts of my body. And, it was enough for me to stay alive and be able to go home and be discharged from the hospital with, regular care. But I had to move in with my parents at 33 years old. We all had to move in with my parents because they had to watch my children, and I could not do anything for myself nor for them. So it was a really, really hard time. And it was around that time, actually in the hospital, when I Googled POTS syndrome, that I came across a YouTube channel of Sarah Jackson, and she was discussing her journey with POTS and how she recovered. And she mentioned this program called the Dynamic Neural Retraining System, or DNRS. And I thought, I'm like, this is snake oil. There's no way that there's something that actually works. And I just left it at that. I pushed it to the back of my mind and just never looked at it again. So the next few months kind of unfolded pretty, pretty rough, with a lot of return visits to the hospital and tweaking to medications. It was a really, really low time for me. And when I say low, I'm saying I begged God, and I didn't even believe there was a God at that point because I was going through so much. But I begged whoever it was to please, please not let me wake up the next day. And I know a lot of retrainers who are listening to this have probably been in that state where they have felt this exact same despair and hopelessness. And I didn't have belief, I didn't have hope. And to be honest, what got me through is other people's belief and hope. My family believed for me, my friends hoped for me, and people prayed for me. And it came to a point where my parents just made an arrangement at a church, an appointment with our local parish and our local priest. And they got me in the car, carried me there, and placed me on the altar. And the priest said a special prayer at that point for me. And it was a prayer of health, a prayer of salvation. And I wasn't very religious or anything then, but I just was like, whatever, I'll try anything at this point. And I still remember that day where I'm placed on the altar, and the priest is reading a prayer, and my parents are crying and everyone's crying, and I'm just like, this is over, life is over. And somehow, in some way, it's like a glimmer of light came in, and somehow, like, I don't know, I want to call it a hope rope was thrown, and I like grabbed on tight for dear life, and I was like, oh, maybe. So I left that day with a maybe. There was something there. And it's crazy because that exact same time, DNRS showed up again in my life. So it came up through like a Facebook forum, and I had not seen it since. And I decided to bite the bullet and be like, okay, I'm going to pay for this and buy it and see what happens. And I'll tell you, so much has happened from that point.
Just for timeline, when was that around? That was around 2018, 19?
Yeah, that was 2018.
Okay. Okay. It's interesting because, in when you study some of the experts in the world of mind body medicine, they that like are now studying what they call neuroplastic pain, and they say pain loosely to encompass anything from pain to illness to disease, to any kind of symptoms in our body at all, if you will. They say that this neuroplastic quote unquote pain usually presents itself in a couple different ways. And one can be they've discovered from like traumas and emotional stuff, repressed emotion or traumas over the years. But they say that sometimes neuroplastic pain literally develops from an onset of an injury or poison or some kind of toxic exposure or some like actual real illness. And then the brain essentially gets cross-wired from because so many things can happen. We can get so dysregulated from the stress of the sickness that we're experiencing. And so it's interesting because it kind of sounds like you picked something up when you were traveling that wreaked havoc on your body that then but then even after like the treatments that quote unquote should have worked, you were stuck in this loop of all this chronic illness. And it seems like maybe that's kind of how that neuroplastic pain kind of emerged within your system in a sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what's interesting is that up until that point, I wouldn't have said that there was anything wrong with me or that I had any issues. But
Uh-huh.
looking back, I definitely saw signs of dysregulation from when I was a child. They just
Uh,
weren't, yeah, they just weren't loud enough
mhm,
to really well, I guess they were loud enough because I did have, some chronic issues as a child as well. But there is trauma, so I would have both. But yes, I agree with you where there are some cases where something like a virus or a vaccine injury or like some sort of accident or whatever it might be can cause something like this.
mhm,
So in my case, I had both, and I recognize this now. I didn't then, but I definitely had seeds of dysregulation. Like, I had the platform for it before that infection or the parasite infection I got.
mhm. Yeah, and that makes sense too, because generally, if you think about how severe you ended up, sick, I mean, generally you would think that more than likely for somebody to encounter that much illness ongoing, they probably, if you were already, if you're, how do I want to word this? If your brain reacted like that intensely, it was likely not the first conflict, or first time that you were experiencing some level of dysregulation. Is probably that it's that building effect.
Yes, for sure,
Mhm.
100%.
Yeah. It's so crazy though, because so often when we're in it, we it's so easy to just be like, oh, well, it came out of nowhere. Nothing was going on. But then when we can look back in hindsight after years and years of working through healing and research and learning so much and understanding this connection, we're like, oh, it didn't really come out of nowhere.
So true. Like, what do you mean nothing was going on? I'm totally fine. And meanwhile, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so 2018, at some point, you have DNRS. put back in front of you for the second time. And that is such a common story. I hear this all the time, and it also happened for me. So many people, we hear about it, we learn about it, but it's like that seed's just getting planted, but we're not ready for it. We throw it to the back burner, and then something happens where it comes back to the forefront, before we actually finally take that plunge. So you sign up for it, and herein begins the journey of true healing. So tell us a little bit about what happens moving forward through that journey.
Sure. Yeah, it's really interesting because even when I purchased it, I didn't start it right away. I was still an unbeliever, but I kept it there. I'm like, okay, this is this is my only option right now. But I was still very much stuck in the sickness identity. So what's funny is around the same time I went for an appointment for an assessment through like insurance or whatever, and the doctor, so psychotherapist, she started to explain the mind body connection, and I got upset. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you trying to say, that my migraines aren't exist, that they're not real? Like, I got pissed. I literally yelled at her and had never felt so um you know just I was just so offended by it all. And so that was kind of like around the same time. But anyhow, I so like you said, those seeds were planted, right? Those seeds were planted, and it all comes to a point where we have to be ready to make this choice, right? To make this change, this shift, to say, you know what? I've got nothing else to lose, and I'm going to try this. I've tried everything else. And that's where I was. I had tried everything else. And so I started watching those DVDs, and at that point, the brain fog was so intense that it took me 2 weeks to get through 4 days of video. And that was with me trying to rewatch and reread. Like, I couldn't really read at that point. If I did read, it was like one sentence. And then I was like, what did I read? And then I'd have to go back. So it was a really slow progress. And when I started, the actual implementing the program, the tools, the exercises, I still didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. And I needed to get a lot of support from the forums. It was hard just because it wasn't quite clicking as much. But I did start to notice some shifts pretty early on. And I think the first shift that I noticed was I started to have hope, and just this understanding of what was going on, because I never had answers. When the entire decade of illness, I didn't have answers. It was more of a, what's wrong with me? Could it be something else? What if it is this? What if they're missing something? What are they missing? And at this point, I decided to just throw everything out and was just like, okay, I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to believe that this is a limbic system dysfunction. And that's where the healing began. Is I started to do my rounds, which are, for those of you listening, there are a particular exercise that's part of the DNRS program, and it consists of certain phrases that you say, and talking to your survival brain, and then adding in this visualization piece. And it was, I became pretty dedicated to it. And my family knew. I told everyone what I was doing. And I even put out a call out on Facebook and was like, hey guys, I am doing this thing to rewire my brain in hopes that it's going to heal me. Can I get you guys to send me any really good memories you have of me? Because at that point, I had no memories, and part of the program involves memory recollection. And so it's crazy because I got a flood of people from like high school and childhood, and friends and family sending me really good memories. And this is something I recommend to all of my clients as well, or any retrainers. But that's kind of how my journey started. I was very open. I'm like, hey, everyone, I'm doing this. Let's see what happens. And slowly in time, like, it wasn't a fast, healing. It wasn't overnight. It did take time. And there were ups and there were downs, but slowly I started to see the link between my survival brain, being completely, stuck in this survival state, and all of the problems I had, all the symptoms that I was experiencing. And in time, slowly by slowly, with elevating my mood, with incrementally training, with doing my visualizations and my rounds, I started to do more. I started to be able to do little things like cook, take care of my kids. I moved back home. That was a big one. I moved back into my house with my family, and I started to be a mom again. And in time, I started to drive again. And in time, I started to work again. It was just like very gradual, but just such big moments. And yeah, it's been like the best thing I ever did, I have to say, for myself, for my family, and for my future.
Mm. Now, were you able to eventually wean off all those medications?
Yes. So I was on 12 daily meds in addition to like supplements galore. Like, you know how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Just popping so many. So yeah, I was able to come off all of them. During my retraining journey, there have been times where I've had to temporarily go back on one, for, I guess, for certain issues, but then off of them again. So I'm not really reliant on anything. But yeah, it's that was a process in itself, and a very slow process, because coming off each one of those was kind of like an incremental training in itself, right? Just slowly getting used to the body, adjusting to the change, and then but it's amazing what the body can do when you give it what it needs, right? When you give it the space, when you give it the tools. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, how long did you end up doing DNRS for?
Yeah, so I did it really consistently for about a year and a half, and it helped immensely with POTS, with all the other dysregulation symptoms, but it didn't help as much with the migraines that I was having. So it was interesting, because I'm like, well, why isn't this helping the migraine? Why am I still getting them so frequently? Everything else has really calmed down. And it's at that point that I discovered Dr. John Sarno and the Curable program. And then I started to see the link between repressed emotions, the way that the brain might perceive certain emotions as a threat, and give us symptoms to either protect us from it or distract us from it. So I started to see this new, again, very much neuroplasticity based, but this idea of, wow, maybe this migraine or this pain that I'm having is because I'm not feeling. And so it's what's interesting is the Curable app itself is what started my trauma healing journey. So I did the basics of brain training. I did DNRS to its full capacity, and I think my nervous system really calmed down enough for the trauma to heal. And that's when the migraines peaked, because it was like, oh no, trauma's coming up. Let's distract her because this is dangerous. This is scary. And with the help of Curable, journaling, and working on my beliefs with a trauma like trained coach, I was able to move through those, and I was able to get rid of chronic migraine um, and start healing my past. And that was a really big step for me. And I don't think I would have been ever been able to do that deeper work had I not done the brain retraining first, because that's really what gave me the foundation for it, and then allowed me to pursue the trauma, to go back into my past more resourced than ever, and change my experience of the present.
I love how you were able to connect the dots and see how the how you were able to see that the DNRS helped your nervous system to calm down, which then allowed the trauma to surface, right? Because they always say that like things that are deep in our subconscious, they won't come up for us until we're ready for them.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. I was not ready for that stuff. I had repressed so much of it. And I think that it was a blessing that it came up. And I like that you talked about anxiety, because, girl, that is something that I experienced, and that I mean, you will see it on every forum out there. It's like you hit this really big part of your healing, and then like it's like the anxiety kicks in. And I feel like it's this natural rite of passage in many ways, because for me, it's a symbol of moving into a next, this next part of your healing, where now you have all of this new energy, right? That maybe was repressed and it just didn't know where to go. And then now it's trying to figure out, where does it need to be placed? This recalibration period. But also when it comes to the trauma work, the deeper work, that anxiety comes up as a protection, is a part
Mhm.
of you protecting you from this past, from remembering those things. So curable was instrumental for me in being able to recognize, like, oh, I know my survival brain is just trying to distract me. Hey, it's okay for me to feel these things. It's okay for me to face my reality. I can do this, and I have the tools to do this. And yeah, it's I've seen the same as you, where I know that typical brain retraining is that first step that I feel like most programs these days have included and is necessary. So I'm like, I would never recommend jumping right into the deeper work, especially if you're already dysregulated.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely yeah, like a nice natural progression.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was definitely one of the people who experienced the physical sensations of anxiety. Like the deeper I went into the DNRS, I was like, wait, now what's happening? I was supposed to be feeling great, and now all of a sudden I had these crazy intense like physical anxiety sensations. At the
Yeah.
time I didn't know how to label it, then I learned what it kind of was. Which was, but it was like the next step, and it helped guide me for sure. And it's interesting because there was a point in my journey where I ended up having a crazy uptick of migraines also. So
Oh,
I love how you were able to correlate that, because that's kind of a new perspective for me. I never looked at it that way, but at the time I just remember thinking, "Oh my God, I haven't had these in like 17 years. Why are they coming back like as if I'm 17 again?" And
yeah.
so,
I know
yeah.
that I actually experienced that recently, and I'm going to be authentic and honest with you guys, because I feel like that's, how we need to be. But like, life happens even on the other side of healing. And last year, this time, my father passed away suddenly. And, with the whole, you know, pandemic and everything going on, it was just a really difficult time for everyone. But I noticed an increase in some sort of dysregulation after that. And what's interesting is the body, we know the body remembers, we know the body keeps the score. And when this month came around this year, so leading up to his 1 year anniversary, I got this like bloody migraine that I haven't had in like 4 years. I had not taken an abortive med, I had not taken anything. And it like hit me hard. And I was like, why am I getting this? Is weird. Where's this coming from? And then I realized the date. I realized, this time of week, I realized what this was. And I was like, oh, this is a really hard time. And my survival brain is like amping up for this. It remembers, it knows, and it's trying so hard to protect me. And I had to really do that work again, where I was like, oh, I'm fully resourced now. Like, I have the tools. I know what to do, and it's okay for me to feel. And then doing that, that work that we learn in Nicole Sachs or Curable, where it's like, I have emotions now that need to come out. And by working through those and journaling out and feeling them and supporting myself through them, you're able to get through those little dips or whatever you want to call them. And it's not that I went back in my healing. It's just that this was an expression from my survival brain. It was trying to protect me again. And now I knew what it was. So I don't fear these things like I did in the past, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that takes the power away. And they say that like when we can get to that place of indifference, that's where the magic can really happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Good job on recognizing that and then being able to take the necessary steps for sure.
Thank you.
So what these days, because like you said, life does happen. So
Yeah.
we're always going to experience new challenges at some point, no matter how hard we try to control and create a life that's perfect. It's not reality, right? Like people
Right.
will pass on, and you might lose like a loved one, or, whether it's a person, a pet. Sometimes unexpectedly you could lose a job. Like
Hmm.
there's just an infinite number of things that could happen that could impact us because we are emotional beings here having this experience. So, what are some of the daily practices that you have today to help support your nervous system and stay regulated and to build that resilience ongoing to help you then be able to navigate these challenging times in life?
Yeah, so I like to see my daily practice as very intuitive. Prior to my father's passing last year, I wasn't really doing much retraining, but I was doing a little bit of somatic work, some vagus nerve work, and a visualization because visualizations are my favorite. And after I contracted the virus and was, labeled as a long hauler, which I didn't accept, I went back to a little more strict brain retraining. So I was doing 2 rounds a day, 2 full rounds a day, which were the DNRS typical ones. And then doing a lot of body based things to help release the trauma from the grief. And so it kind of looked like, intuitively, what am I needing in this moment? And how can I give that to myself? The inner child work came very in handy. So that was kind of like how this last year has been, right? Like as I'm processing grief, and we can't retrain, we can't rewire grief. It just doesn't happen like that. But we can support ourselves in a way where it doesn't consume our entire nervous systems and we go back into that like dysregulated state. So what that has looked like for me has been every morning, I love to start my day off with a really gentle somatic, like 5-10 minutes, doing, certain somatic experiencing exercises that I've learned from various different places, like Peter Levine, working with a somatic therapist in the past. Just little things that I've picked up that I find intuitively feel good and help me release. And then I always do a visualization. So I always try and use my visualization tools to work towards, the life that I'm looking to have. Prayer is a huge, huge anchor in my day. So that's another, non-negotiable throughout my day. And then I kind of see, how it goes. So if I'm noticing I'm having like a really crazy busy day or something unexpected happened, like you said, I've got 2 young kids. There's like a lot of drop offs. There's a lot of phone calls from school. There's a lot of appointments and extracurricular. Even while I'm in the car, waiting to pick them up from school, I will do maybe some breathing or some gentle massage on my ear or some vagus nerve exercises. So the way I see it is like we want to resource ourselves throughout our day. We don't want to pay attention to our nervous system only when it's freaking out. We want to be able to offer it a little bit of cushion, right? We want to be able to say like, hey, I'm going to love on you even when you're feeling good, right? So I see it like the way you would treat a child. It's like, I'm not only going to pay attention to you when you're crying and you're, having a tantrum. I'm going to love you throughout the day. So how can you show your nervous system love? And I see this as a lifestyle, not as a retraining routine or as, a certain amount of things that you have to do in a day, but intuitively tuning in. What do I need in this moment? Maybe I do want to rest and I'm going to make it a choice and do that. Or maybe I am feeling a little more activated. So I'm going to do a couple deep, 10 minutes of deep breathing and bring myself back here. So that's kind of like how I approach this, I guess, nervous system love or self love, whatever you want to call it. It's not a typical brain retraining daily practice that I have, but it's very unique to me. And this is, what I really recommend and what my goal is for every person I work with is to come to a place where you've created something that fits into your day as if it's just a part of you. And it feels right. It feels good. It doesn't feel like that chore. So this is kind of like I don't even want to call it a maintenance practice. I just want to call it just being there to support your nervous system and give it the best resources you can for whatever happens in life.
How do you help somebody navigate determining what feels best for them when they don't really know, when they're like, "Oh, I don't really know what feels best," or, "Well, I don't know what I need." Like, how do you help
Yeah.
them to be empowered to go inward and discern what it is that they actually do need?
Oh, this is all trial and error for myself as well. If I were to ask, like, well, for me, a lot of this started with inner child work. So, getting to know those parts of us that are really screaming for our attention, and then tuning into them, like, well, what do you really want from me in this moment? Like, what is it that you're needing? And then trying things. So this is very, even when it comes to tools in general, the people that I work one-on-one with, we try a lot of things out, because not every program, we know this, and I know you know this, not there's no one size fits all to any program. And there's some exercises that could be triggering to others, and then some exercises that feel so nourishing. And so we basically try a lot of different things out, and through certain processes of tuning in, and awareness as to how our body is reacting, we usually get a good sense as to what is helping the nervous system and what isn't. So we do know intuitively. It's just a matter of tuning out all of the noise and coming into the body. That embodiment practice is so important. And also visualizing too, like I like to try things on from a visualization perspective as well for them. Like, what do you really see yourself doing in a day? What are your goals throughout the day? If you were healed right now, what would your day look like? And, how can we kind of fit in some love into there, or some support? So it's, I guess, I don't know if I answered your question, but it's very, very unique. And it's a process of discovery and unfolding as you're, doing this work and trying things on.
Yeah, no, and I think that's all really important to highlight, because I think that a lot of people sign up for one program or another, right? And we know that each program kind of has like its own guidelines, like, oh, you need to do this and follow this and do this just like this. And I think some people, I've witnessed so many people get so stressed over feeling like they need to put their pressure, like this pressure on themselves to do this said program perfectly. And you'll see it all the time, like people like, well, what if I can't do this like this, or what if I can't do this perfectly, or what if I can't do it this many times? And it's like, when you look at the fact, there's a bunch of programs out there and people are having success in all of them, and they're all different in their own way. So then I always want to encourage people, like, this is where we get to take our power back. Like,
Hmm.
we gave it away to all the doctors and all these other people. Well, we don't need to give it away to whoever the person was that designed one specific program. Like, we get to try things on and trust that if something's not working for you, and maybe it worked for 5 other people, but you're feeling too activated from it, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with that program, that particular exercise, just not, it's not supportive for you right now. And it's okay, because you can find something that is.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that you said that. I really do, because it's such an important point, because I see so many people coming to me or just messaging me with like absolute pressure and healing burnout, where they just feel like the stakes are so high, and if I don't do it like this, I'm not going to heal. And just, how that internal dialogue, keeps running inside of us. But the truth is, if it doesn't, feel good for you, or if there's a part of the program that doesn't resonate with your beliefs, you can change that. You can add in things that do resonate with you, that are a part of you. You can bring in your personality, you can tie in the things you love, and you can make it not just this daunting practice that you have to do every day, but it can become more of a lifestyle that you actually look forward to doing, right, instead of a
Yeah.
to-do list task.
Yeah, absolutely. And because one part doesn't work doesn't mean you have to throw the whole thing out the window and like go try the next thing. Like, you don't have to
Yeah.
like program hop. You can just like really, you know,
Yeah,
like you said, kind of make it
exactly.
your own in a sense. Yeah, I just think that's an important thing, because I'm all about personal empowerment, and I just feel so sad when I see people constantly giving it away. And yeah, it's good to make it, like you said, make it something that you actually look forward to.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because it can feel so like it's like such a chore, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And with that comes resistance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I know the last time we talked a lot about resilience actually. And one of the things that we focused on that I'd like for us to touch base on again is we talked about how sometimes when we start to do these programs, like say a brain retraining program, like whether it's DNRS or something else out there, we have a lot of success and that's great. But I feel that there's sometimes not necessarily a lot of guidance in transitioning out of like full-time brain retraining into living life, going back into our lives again. And so like we've already kind of touched base on, I didn't realize or have didn't know that there was a chance that this like high level anxiety could like show up. You didn't know that you were going to suddenly get these like intense outbursts of like migraines, like, and some people find this happens a lot where they have a huge reduction in symptoms, but then they feel like they're on, like they're just flying high and they're great, and then they start to reduce some of the time they're spending on their healing and start to say yes to living, but then they have this uptick in various symptoms, and it's really hard for people to sometimes go through that transition. Do you have, through your experience, any tips, tricks, and support you can offer people listening to help them as they navigate that transition?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we all get to that place in our healing journey where we've come a long way, but we're not quite where we want to be, and we're in this like middle place where there's still some things going on. Maybe you're not where you exactly want to be, but you don't want to devote an hour every day to doing rounds or whatever it might be. So what I've seen most often is a lot of fear attached to this, to letting a round go. So I've seen people being scared to drop a round. Like, so in for those listening in DNRS, you have to do an hour of rounds a day. Sometimes it looks like 4 a day. And so what I like to do is incrementally training to untrain. So what that would look like would be dropping one round off, a day, or sorry, one a week, pretty much, like you're doing it incrementally. So you would drop a round, say that week you're only doing 3 rounds. And maybe instead of that round, you're gifting something to yourself, a really good and positive experience. Because healing doesn't have to look like just sitting in a room doing visualizations or tapping or in a child work. Healing can also look like going out and living life, going for a walk, doing something, meeting with a friend. Those things are all healing as well. And so that's kind of my first thing is starting to experiment and letting go of the need. Like, I don't need to do all of these rounds anymore. And I'm fully resourced. And I know if something were to come about in my nervous system, were to start talking to me loudly again, I know what to do now. I know how to listen, and I have all the resources I need. So that coming from this place of agency is like, oh, I know better now. So I don't need to be afraid of these. And recognizing, are there limiting beliefs at play? Do you believe that if you stop retraining, you're going to end up back where you were? And if that is the case, then I would definitely look into doing some deeper work, maybe tapping those beliefs out, maybe journaling them, seeing where they're coming from, seeing what's at the root of them. Additionally, when you're starting to live life again, you're going to experience new situations. And those new situations are new for your limbic system as well, for your survival brain. So as you're doing these new things, maybe your nervous system might overreact here and there. And this is where I encourage taking or trying to have it some recovery time after these new things. So for instance, say, you're feeling so much better, you're doing all of these things and you're going on your first trip. Maybe you're starting whatever to get a couple symptoms that are like, hey, remember me? Old neurology is popping up, right? Because you're doing all of these things. Well, you know what to do at that point. We know that they're not going to take you over or that you're going to go back to that place because you know what to do. So I would say go back to basics, maybe use some of your tools at that point, but always allow for that recovery time. Meaning, say you have a really busy day ahead or a really stressful day ahead. schedule in some time to release, to let go of activation energy, within whatever way that you feel you need to, whether it's somatics, whether it's exercise, whether it's meditation, whether it's deep breathing. We want to be able to weave those into your day as recovery times for like really stressful or not even stressful, like absolutely new experiences that maybe your nervous system just hasn't had a chance to, experience before or in a long time. So having this adaptability is like knowing I can do these things, and I know what to do if old neurology pops in. Like I know what this is, and I know what to do with it. I don't know if that answered your question, but
It does. Yeah, it's great because I think that what we can do sometimes is, and it all comes back down to fear, right? Like you just gave some great examples, and like if we don't know, because I think that's the problem, is like if we don't know to expect that things could happen, what happens is we get a new symptom and suddenly we go into fear mode, and then we go into like, oh my God, I did something wrong, or we think, oh, this is outside of my training zone, and then we withdraw again. And what I see happen when that is the response is like getting kind of stuck in that weird limbo where you like want to take the next step, but you're so afraid. And then you start to like associate things as all out of the training zone again.
yeah,
And like, you said examine beliefs. Well, yeah, so important, right? Because our beliefs are super freaking powerful. So if I believe something's out of my training zone versus you said it so lightly, like, okay, like the brain's just like having a memory or it's just being triggered again, but it doesn't mean you're out of your training zone. You didn't do anything wrong necessarily. And it's just learning how to bring that ease back in and create that safety. Um, and yeah, just not going into that fear constantly, or not like believing, you said, to like notice if you're believing that if you start to stop doing as much healing work that you're not going to heal. Well, that's a really strong belief. And if you
oh yeah,
believe that, it's going to present itself as a challenge in that journey.
exactly. Yep.
hmm So no, I think those are great, great tips. And as far as like say somebody's doing DNRS or Gupta or any of the brain retraining programs out there, what and say they're listening to this and they're like, oh, okay, so there's other layers, there's other steps, and they're thinking, well, when do I know when it's good to transition, or maybe peel back the next layer, or try something new, or add somatics into the experience, since we know that traditional brain retraining is more top down. What are some of your thoughts on what people could be noticing or observing or looking out for in their body, in their mind, and in their life as an indicator or cue that they would be ready to like take that leap and start integrating some other tools?
Yeah, so I know that the typical brain retraining doesn't really include the somatics, but now that I kind of know more about that's the mind body connection, and how important it is to find safety within our bodies again. I actually do like incorporating, even at the beginning, some vagus nerve work, some gentle somatic practices, maybe orienting or whatever it might be to just help you come back into your body. And so I think these can be used, again, nothing really, really intense. We're not going to be going into trauma or anything like that. But just these subtle signals of safety that we can send to our survival brain through our bodies. I think that I really do like how some programs are incorporating both top down and bottom up in the beginning stages. Not to say that, we know so many people have healed with just DNRS or Gupta, but I do, looking back, as my own personal preference, I feel like adding in a little bit of that bottom up approach can help. Now, as for going into deeper work, I know for myself, I just couldn't ignore it. I got to a place where my body knew to bring it up. I started to notice, more tension. I started to notice different thinking, old memories that surfaced that I had not had in I really just didn't remember. I had repressed them. And this was for me, really pretty in your face sign that, oh, we have to deal with this stuff now. And it was things that I just couldn't ignore. And so kind of be on the lookout for that. Obviously, again, we don't want to rush into anything, and that there's more time than you think there is, right? We don't have to. And I've also seen so many people do typical, just regular brain retraining and not have to do any deeper work.
Hmm.
So it is right? It's so individual. And, like I would say give it time, like really give whatever program you're doing, whatever practice you're doing, give it at least that 6 months. Like, give it the chance. And don't be so eager to jump onto something else. And that's what I see a lot. The program hopping,
Hmm.
it's a real thing. And you're going from program to program because we want to hope, right? We see these testimonials and we're like, oh, well, this one isn't working. Well, okay, well, how long did you do it for? Okay, well, I want to know how you did it. Like, how many rounds did you do a day? What did it look like for you? Did you really understand it? And so I think that like whatever program you're doing, clearly they all work. They all do something there, they all rewire your brain. It's just a matter of seeing which one, what fits for you, what parts of it you do and you don't like, and giving it the opportunity, giving your brain the opportunity to rewire, and not rushing to do all of the deeper work. When it's time, you will know. Like I'm telling you, you will know when it's time to go deeper. And if you've been doing a program for a really long time and you haven't gotten to where you wanted to be, this is where I recommend, going with a coach, getting to really talk about like what it is, what are your healing goals, where's the resistance, what's happening for you, what is and what isn't working, right? And this is more like when I see people who have been like, say doing DNRS for like 2 years and they're like, I'm still dealing with the same symptoms.
Hmm. Yeah, it's the opposite, right? Like there's the people who there's the program hopping going from one to the next without giving anything a full chance. And then there's like, well, the opposite spectrum when you're like, okay, well, it's been 3 years and it's not really getting you where you want to be. So maybe this is where you start pursuing some other
Yes.
self-healing outlets.
Exactly. Yeah. And then at that point you can, and it's good to freshen things up. I don't think your healing practice should look the same it did 3 years ago that it does now, nor 6 months ago. I like to constantly evolve and drop things, add something new in, just like exercise. If you're going to the gym and doing the exact same weight exercise that you've done for the past, like 6 months, you're probably not going to see the results that you're wanting to see. And so I think the core of it, again, the framework should be pretty consistent, but playing around, adding in new ideas, adding in some more fun things, right? We want it to be variable, like we want it to be different and we want to keep learning, basically, right? Get those new neural pathways going. So that's, I guess, my biggest or one of my biggest advice I can give on that subject.
Yeah, no, thank you. Is there anything else like that I'm not asking you about or that we're missing that you think is just a really valuable insight for people who are out there at any point in their healing journey?
Oh yeah, I wanted to just touch on compassion.
Oh, yes,
I
please.
Yeah, I noticed that, and this was for myself as well. I'm going to be honest. I did not have much compassion for myself, and I was really, really hard on myself, even from a young kid. But when I started my retraining journey, that like militant attitude came with. And when, say, I didn't get around in today, I was really hard on myself. Or when I would dip or have, some sort of crash. Initially, I was really hard. Like, what did I do? What did I do wrong? And I see this a lot, and that's why I'm bringing it up. There's such a lack of self compassion. We're so easy to give it, freely to others, but we can't to ourselves. And, wherever that comes from, I'm sure there's a root in it somewhere in your history, but this compassion is what is so needed in this healing realm, in whatever practice, whatever program you're doing, the compassion piece where you know what? I showed up today. Maybe I didn't do it all, but that's okay. And I'm going to love myself anyways. Or today was a harder day. it was more challenging. And you know what? I love myself for getting through it and handling it the way I did. Or, just what do I need in this moment? Like, I'm really listening to my needs, and I need like a hug, or I need some, connection with a friend, or whatever it is that you're needing. Learning to give yourself these things, not punish yourself for, a lack of something or whatever it might be, getting to really connect with you and giving yourself the compassion, the love, the understanding, helping yourself feeling like seeing yourself, hearing yourself, right? Because we all grow up kind of, most of us in this journey weren't seen or heard as kids. That's what I've seen as a, common theme. But this inner child and compassion piece, where we really, really, it's really missing in a lot of programs. We are all way too hard on ourselves, and we're taking the healing work way too seriously, and and it's just adding an unnecessary stress to us. So more compassion, more ease, more grace, recognizing we all have our own pace and we don't have to compete with anyone else. And whatever you did today, if you did it with love and compassion for yourself, and you showed up for you, you did it out of love for you, then that's what matters.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I mean, it's so true. It's so true. It's so true. Everybody could use more of that self-compassion, and it's not selfish, and it's not self-centered, and it's so important. It's like what I was saying earlier about like going into your healing with this like perfection type A achiever mentality and not having grace for yourself. It's like every day our best is not going to be the same. My best today might not look the same as yesterday's best, and that's okay, you know? And
Yeah.
I feel like overall I do these days a pretty good job with self-compassion, but I'm also human and I'm not always great. I literally noticed it yesterday and I'm so grateful that I caught myself within minutes, but I've been like really trying to make this commitment to myself to try to get out and go dancing like once a week, because I know that dancing brings such an absolute high level of joy for me in my life. With that said, it's usually later in the evenings. It's cooler now. It's dark really early. I'm still working through some neuroplastic fatigue. And I know that one side of the spectrum to actually like feel the fatigue and choose my joy and go out and say yes to like dancing, if it's even for like an hour, is very valuable for me in my retraining. But I also, understand that sometimes like it's still hard to say yes, even though I know I'd
Mm.
love it once I'm there. And yesterday was one of those days. Like, I worked late Saturday. I didn't get like a full night's sleep Saturday night, and I was quite busy Sunday. And then when it was time to go dancing, it had cooled down. It was pitch black dark. I just felt this urge to just curl up in a ball, and I was really struggling with the motivation to go. And then I noticed that I started beating myself up because I'm like, this is your joy, and this is, and you how are you gonna, like, you keep telling yourself that you're gonna do these things for joy, but then you're not doing them. And so here I am taking something that was supposed to be for my joy and beating myself up over it. And I caught myself and I stopped and I was like, you know what? No, we're not doing this. This is okay. Like, we're going to dance again. We're going to dance a lot. And it's okay if it takes us time, and it's okay if we miss weeks, and it's okay if sometimes, we say no. And I thought maybe for the winter, I just do some exploring and see if there's anything even earlier or like daytime opportunity, or maybe I take a Zumba class, which isn't quite the same, but it's still that, kind of in that realm. So, but it was just nice to finally catch myself so quick and be like, no, we're not doing this. We're not beating ourselves up. We're not we're not having this negative mindset that I'm letting myself down because I didn't go dancing. I like once, or even if it's
Yeah.
twice, it's like, it's okay. Like, just like all the tools we use for healing, everything, it's like there's not a rush. doesn't have to all happen right now, and I can just have grace for wherever I'm at.
Yes, exactly. I love that example, and I think it's so, so relatable, even just to retraining in general, right? When we just
Hmm.
don't do all the things. I didn't do all the things today.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
There's always tomorrow.
Yeah.
And, as long as you showed up in some way for yourself, which you basically did it, you showed us that you did show up for yourself. You caught that, that inner dialogue, that negative inner dialogue, and you spoke your truth, right? And you recognize that it's just a part of you that's trying to protect you. And it's this these old patterns that we're so used to that we're wiring out. And sometimes they pop up to say hello. And that
Hmm.
compassion, instead of that, like you said, that like punishing or like anger, whatever it might be that's coming up, it's the compassion that wins, right? It's so, so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I felt really, really proud of myself yesterday for catching that.
Yeah, well done. Well done.
And then I was like, and now I have permission to just go curl up and snuggle my dog and like read a book, and that's okay too, because that's also fun.
Yes, I've watched a lot of Hallmark movies this past week because it was especially hard with an anniversary of my father, and I gave myself full permission. I'm like, I've got the tree lit, I've got like hot cocoa and Hallmark Christmas movies going like for a few hours one day, right? And I was like, I didn't feel bad at all. Whereas in the past, I would have been like, well, I didn't do laundry, I didn't cook, I didn't this. Well, you know what? This is just as important. It really is. My body, my soul, my mind needed it, and I gave it to myself. And that is a true measure of healing. So
Hmm.
you're doing amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
um, what is the one message you would share with the world if you were only able to share one message for the rest of your life?
I want that to be a message of hope because I've been in that dark place and I know so many are. And I would just say that there is always a reason to hope, and that there are so many people out there like myself giving hope ropes, and we're doing it for a reason because we've been there. So look to the ones who have been in your place and see their recovery, their healing as proof that it can be true for you too. And it's only just a matter of time. So yeah, I guess
Yeah,
I'll leave you with that.
I like that. And like we were already just saying, don't compare yourself though to their
Yes.
journey.
Yes,
Don't
exactly.
compare yourself and beat yourself up over it if it
Yes,
doesn't happen in
compassion,
the same
compassion.
timeline.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm so grateful that we got to do this and again.
Yes, me too. I think the second time was even better.
Yeah, well, we're practiced now.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you. I feel like this journey has really that you've embarked on has really brought you to this place of like so much wisdom and understanding of the mind body and healing and yeah, I just want to say thank you for being here to share some of that with people who are out there listening.
My absolute pleasure. It's honestly an honor every time I do one of these interviews because I know it will reach a different audience, and that my mission is to give hope. So I appreciate you and thank you for having me.
Of course. All right, that's a wrap. Once again, as always, with each and every episode, I hope you found today's insightful, inspiring, or hopeful for wherever you are at in your journey. I always want you to walk away from our time together feeling more motivated, more ready, more inspired, with a better sense of direction, possibility, and hope. Please, 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 please consider helping me to continue to spread this message of healing and possibility as far and wide as possible. That means share this episode on your social media, share it with friends and family, share it in your healing or health groups. Also, I did start a private Facebook group where we could be more connected. Please consider joining that so that I can get to know you all better. And in this group, you can make requests such as asking questions for future guests, making requests for future guests, volunteering to be a future guest, and so much more. Have fun exploring what it means to love yourself in a variety of ways. And until next time, make this week great.